Hi! What? Were you expecting a funny opening bit? No. That's for the communities that play nice, you see. Instead, viewer, please take a look at the man to your right and the man to your left. Then look up. Well, now that those creatures are dealt with, and I have hit my war crime per minute quota, how about you subscribe and like instead, since apparently saying that within the first 30 seconds of a video actually does help for some reason, and we wouldn't want any accidents happening to you, right? Anyway, Dark Knight, my bread and butter in Final Fantasy. We will be covering it more in depth today without going into super basics or general tanking. If you want to know more about those, I literally made 3 videos on it, please just go watch those. Aside from your rotation and just pressing a mitigation button for raid wides and tank busters, most things are fight-based, so treat this as both a guide and some weird facts that might help you. Now then, let's start with how to deal damage. There are 3 things that can cause you to lose damage on Dark Knight. Not having Dark Side buff, which you get for 30 seconds at a 60-second cap every time you use Edge or Flood of Shadow, which you should be using whenever you can anyway, except for Blackest Night usage, which we will get to later, don't worry about that now. Overcapping your mana, which also shouldn't happen if you are using Edge or Flood of Shadow, so these 2 are interconnected, and by overcapping your blood gauge, which is easy to avoid by just spamming it on Blood Spiller or Quietus, as long as you are not in Delirium. In which case, do not be in Delirium with above 70 blood gauge. Very simple. If everything you just heard in the last minute sounds like to you, I am honestly surprised you made it this far as Dark Knight. But regardless, I will explain it while going over how to do your rotation. One important thing before we begin, we delay our high damage abilities initially so that they line up with our teammates' damage buffs for the entire party. Hey, no one will tell you this, but if you are playing solo instance, or without any teammates that have raid buffs, you can kind of just skip the initial wait. No one is telling you that? Anyway, what was that? No, nothing. With that, your ideal opener is as follows. Use the Blackest Night 3 seconds or less on whoever is main tanking, which depends heavily on what gear they have and what difficulty of a fight you're doing, and it most likely won't be popping in regular content, and if it is not popping, please do not use it, you will be losing damage. Immediately use Unmanned at -1 seconds before a pull, and optionally a potion if you are doing a fight with an enrage, which is anything extremely difficulty or above. P.S. Only use a potion if you have seen enrage and close to clearing. Do not waste money on potting on pulls where you are not going to kill something. Be nicer to your money. Immediately land an Edge of Shadow before your Heart Slash is ready to use, and use Living Shadow. Follow this up with Siphon Strike and Soul Eater, using Delirium after Soul Eater. This so far has been our setup. Living Shadow takes a while to arrive, which is why we used it earlier, and we want to use at least 1 Edge of Shadow to have Dark Side online. Everything else we haven't used up until now. And by now, every damage buff is online from every single player, so we follow this up with this system to only gain 600 mana instead of 800, since you get 200 extra for Delirium actions. Salt the Dirt and another Edge of Shadow before Scarlet Delirium, Shadowbringer, and yet another Edge of Shadow before Comeuppance, Carven Spit, and another Edge of Shadow before Torque Lever, followed by another Shadowbringer and Edge of Shadow. Finally spanning the 50 blood gauge gained by your 1, 2, 3 and Delirium with a Blood Spiller and ending it with Salt and Darkness. Between these openers, press your 1, 2, 3, which is Heart Slash, Soul Siphon, and Soul Eater. Any ability that comes off cooldown while making sure your mana and blood gauge does not overcap by using Blood Spiller and Edge of Shadow respectively. Do keep in mind that you will gain 30 blood gauge and can spend it once you use Delirium, so plan accordingly. Knowing how to do your rotation is good and all, but you may have seen some people using Delirium and their setup earlier. Why are they doing that, you might be asking yourself? Well, for me, this is directly from a habit of older rotations where Delirium was not only a separate ability than Blood Weapon, but also a time-based rather than charges, so ideal opener was to use it immediately. And since Evercold and a complete rework is relatively soon, I generally cannot be asked to change that right now. But aside from being an old Dementia cosplayer, there actually is a reason for earlier openers, as there are several fights in-game where a boss may leave the arena at some point for a long time. P.A. Test Part 2 comes to mind. In these cases, using your Delirium and Carven Spit earlier can result in getting it early enough to use it again before the boss leaves, giving you an entire extra use, which is more valuable than raid buffs. Just be careful not to cap your mana and hold the actual delirium strikes a little bit longer just in case you can get a little bit of that damage buffs. For delirium specifically, you need to get 3 GCDs off, so around 9 seconds is fine, 8 seconds is pushing it, as you need 7.5 seconds minimum without lag involved. And lag will be involved every single time. Aside from that, some important notes in non-particular order of importance. Your system has a significantly longer range and can be used to keep better uptime so you can shift it around your rotation. Delirium attacks are their own melee combo. Anything that would break your 1-2-3 will also break it. Do not under any circumstance break that combo. This system, Shadowbringer and Salted Earth hit multiple targets. To die, that's very simple if you read them, but this allows you to deal more damage to 2 targets. If necessary, using them early or slightly later will get you more damage than raid buffs would on 2 targets. This comes in handy with an earlier opener in fights where there are 2 targets, which for now is M10S and way back during Omega raids, where you want to land your AoE attacks on both brothers, but 2 minutes don't exactly line up with them every single time. Now, to get to AoEs, I'll straight up be honest with you. 99.9% of the time, you will only use AoE for trash packs in dungeons and alliance raids, where damage, while important, is not end all be all. Same rotation just replaced with Unleash, Stalwart Soul, Abyssal Drain, and Quietus is more than enough. There are only 2 things to keep in mind. Delirium attacks restore 500 mana instead of 200, adding up to 1100 mana per hit. This means you can very easily overcap, so ensure you have enough mana for 2 TBNs, which should be enough as you can generate enough mana for a third one if really necessary. And since there's only 2 attacks in your 1-2 combo, you will be generating mana faster. While Unleash, Stalwart Sword, and Quietus is an AoE around you, Flood of Shadow, the system, and Shadowbringer is a line AoE in front of you. Make sure you line up the enemies instead of just being in the middle of everything, so you land every single attack you have on every single enemy. Aside from that, there really isn't much to worry about. You can straight up start bursting without the initial weight of 3 GCDs, even as the first pack of enemies tend to melt before you can get all of it out if everyone is doing their job, so you don't need to worry too much about raid buffs in this scenario. Do all of this right, and every 2 minutes you will be hitting enemies so hard, Square Enix nerfs Dark Knight's damage at the start of an expansion pack every fucking time. Alright, now that we are done with the rotation, let's get to the part that people don't discuss enough, as mitigating mediocrely is enough for just about any content save for ultimates, and even then not that much. I will be honest with you, literally no one but you will notice just how much you did. Sort of like adding lead to the water supply of a town 50 years before you invaded, and 9 times out of 10 you would make the healer's job a tiny bit easier with what I'm about to tell you, and maybe save someone in that one weird occasion. There are 2 things you can do when mitigating, except for the Blackest Night. We will get to that one later. That one is a can of worms. Raid-wide or personal alike, you can mitigate early, so whatever that's about to hit hits just before the mitigation expires, or you can mitigate just before it hits. What is the point of doing that? Let's quickly break it down in 2 instances for benefits and downsides of it. Starting with 2 early mitigating scenarios. In this clip, I use Rampart significantly earlier, despite the tank buster being over 15 seconds away. This allows me to take less damage from every auto attack, which can, in this instance, crit for the amount of a tank buster randomly, the entirety of the time. However, if I mitigate too early, Rampart will fall off, leaving me with nothing for the tank buster, and I need to know about the tank buster beforehand to even know how to do this. In this second scenario, I use Dark Missionary far earlier for an upcoming stack. While this time it doesn't really cover any other damage, this allows Dark Missionary to come off cooldown for this raid fight here just barely in time. Same downsides as previous scenario also applies to this. For mitigating late, here is a very specific clip against Bahamut. As you can see here, I use Dark Mind exactly right before Flare Breath, since there's a flatten just about 10 seconds after, giving me another 10% mitigation. Downsides are similar to mitigating early. If you are too late and with ping problems, and you will have ping problems, you are playing Final Fantasy. You or your team will take the tank buster or raid fight without the mitigation, and on top of that, mitigating late means your mitigation will take even longer to come back as well. Now that that's out of the way, let's cover the obvious on your mitigation list before moving on to a long rant about the Blackest Night. Rampart is more suited for long sustained hits, as not only it lasts longer, It increases healing after a certain level, but we're talking about endgame content. If there are no tank busters or very far in between, you should be using Rampart to take auto attacks, while Shadow Vigil is useful for very big tank busters. That being said, Rampart's healing increase only applies after it has been used. If you get a regen, late heal of Shadow Vigil, or anything that applies a buff, how much that will heal is calculated when it's put on you. It does not actively change, so apply Rampart before getting those. Dark Mind and Oblation should be additional layers for mitigation instead of being main mitigations, with only exception being small tank busters that are doing only magic damage for Dark Mind. Alright, now for the Blackest Night rant and explanation. For the uninitiated, proper TBN usage is probably one of the highest impacts you can have in the game, and to make it a bit easier to use on teammates, you can use these macros that I have and do what I did on my screen here, same for Oblation. You should be using TBN and Oblation to help with mistakes. If someone died and got resurrected with little time to heal, if someone is about to die to raid wide, and so on. If trying to help with raid wides when you don't have reprisal or dark missionary, stick them to healers and casters. And since it's a shield, the entire using a cooldown early or late to cover more things don't exactly matter, but not fully. As long as the shield is consumed to not lose out on damage it covers the tank busters, you are good, with one exception. If you are using it to take a big tank buster and you get hit by another auto attack just before the tank buster with TBN used, you can lower the amount of shield that you have received from it, therefore making it less useful for the tank buster. This is good and all, but TBN is also the only goddamn defensive cooldown in the game that eats into your damage. It is up to you to decide if you should be draining all of your mana during 2 minutes and eat a tank buster without it, or hold 3000 mana to TBN a tank buster, but potentially lose out in a 2-minute window damage buff in exchange for one of your Edge of Shadows. If it's nowhere near a reopener though, hold at least 3000 mana or close to 6000 to have a safety net. Since the shield size is always 25% of someone's max health, using it on DPS or healers to save someone will almost always cause it to pop if they get hit. This is a lot of words just to say save enough mana to use it dependent on what's coming up. Make sure it pops and always have it ready for tank busters. Here are some weird TBN facts. TBN always applies 25% max health as shields. It's not affected by any healing down, healing up, or even no healing penalty. The only thing that can increase the shield amount is the amount of max health the target has, which can only be manipulated by a scholar and warrior in the midst of a fight, or someone using a food buff in the middle of a fight, but in which case what the hell are they doing? Let them die, please. TBN will always pop first. If you took 25% of your health as damage to shields and have 10 different sources of shields, TBN will be removed first, regardless of when it was applied. There is some amount of leniency with TBN popping. I have had several instances where TBN popped without any damage despite having about 1% of it left. I don't have the exact numbers for what percentage it pops at, but I'm more of a vibes guy when it comes to tanking anyway. That should cover mitigating in a more vibe-based way. If you disapprove, well, fuck you, man, I don't know what to tell you, and I also covered a non-vibe-based tank in 3 other videos, man. So if you were worried about how scatterbrained the video was so far, it's about to get so much worse. Let me start by giving you the biggest tip you can ever hear. Aside from a rotation and resolution of mechanics, there isn't a set-in-stone way of playing the game. It is completely okay to play the game the way you are used to. I get bullied often by a bundle of dicks on Reddit for using my mouse to click most of my abilities instead of using hotkeys. I cleared Uwu and multiple tiers. And while yes, this will get most of those condescending cons to go, so what is the easiest ultimate in the game? You didn't do anything. It's still an ultimate. So please do not listen to people when it comes to arguments of UI and how you interact with it. Have a silly UI. Lay on regular settings instead of legacy. Do what you are used to while slowly introducing things that are actually problematic in your gameplay, such as fixing your rotation, min-maxing your mitigations better, and having better movements. Everything else is just your choice. Second tip is around the same ballpark. Do not be discouraged for doing bad or not doing as good as that guy you are watching, or from the negative comments you get on how you are doing, while doing the exact same for positive comments. Don't listen to someone telling you are doing great when you know for a fact that you are messing up. Final Fantasy XIV is in a very weird space where moderators won't let any sort of negativity to exist in game, which causes toxic positivity and sarcasm to be a rampant thing. While some people go into spaces such as Twitch, Reddit, or Medium where moderators can reach them to release all that pent-up toxicity. Be realistic when looking at how well you're doing. Third tip is something I have covered many times in previous videos. Movement. Proper usage of movement is key for dodging mechanics and doubly so for melee players, as you need to be near the boss to do damage. Learn the limits of the game where moving out of an AoE around the boss just before it goes off, then going back in between a GCD to have no uptime loss. Learn to use your gap closers to cancel knockback. Learn to move a boss around with back and forth movement to not drop a GCD while moving it around. All of these small adjustments will bring you far more damage than missing a few attacks under buff window. Fourth tip is expectations. Difference between a completely perfect rotation tailored specifically to the fight compared to basic rotation with some awareness is at best going to make you do 1 or 2% more damage. Even the goddamn ultimates are not designed around complete perfection, to the point where world first top clear had a DPS on start of part 2 die. Amount of impact you get for the amount of min-maxing you do won't come into play 99 times out of 1 when it comes to extreme amounts of greeding. So if your greed is going to cause a wipe even once out of 100 pulls, maybe hold back it a bit, to the point where you can pull it off every single time. As long as the damage requirement is being met by your party, it doesn't really matter if you are doing slightly more or slightly less damage. And finally, you are not forced to raid or be at a complete endgame level in this game. It's not everyone's cup of tea to raid to do savages and ultimates, and it's difficult to get into it, requiring statics to low quality in party finder to everything else that happens. If you don't find extremes or savages fun, don't engage with them. There is no shame in it. Don't pretend to be someone you're not. But that's generally about it, really. I know especially the Final Fantasy guides I make sometimes feel incomprehensible on its pacing, and as anyone who tried to start tanking by just trying Gunbreaker or level skips would know, that is just how Final Fantasy feels like when you try to capture something that has to be leveled and experience one ability unlock at a time. These loose concepts feel like a floating puzzle pieces that I hope fit somewhere empty in your head and complete something. Oh, one note before I leave, I kind of forgot about this part completely. Tank swaps. They're not complicated. Just press provoke when you want to aggro, press shirk when you want to give the shirk away. Here is the bind you need to be able to shirk your tank immediately. And you need more information on something specific, just comment. I will do my best to answer them. Or better yet, join my Discord or come ask me on stream by checking out the links below. I'll see you next time.